Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 1132. Interlude. In the alley where few people visited, the environment grew darker as a cold wind wafted through it. Although it wasn't like a blade that could slice a person's face with its coldness, it seemed to possess magic as it slowly but firmly seeped into the clothes of people. As Gehrman's sparrow, Klein raised his hand and pressed down on his top hat. He saw Miss Magician wearing a dark-colored scarf and a thick coat. She carried a rather heavy suitcase and walked into the alley, looking extremely wary. In the Lone Kingdom, due to the Church of Evernight's influence, many of the clothes that were deemed only male also had lady versions of them. Just like in Intis, the ladies of high society often sat sideways while on horseback, thanks to a special saddle. However, Lone didn't do the same. The ladies had their own horseback attire. Klein pulled out his left hand that was wearing creeping hunger from his pocket and spread open his fingers. "Do you have a stockpile prepared?" Furs suddenly felt a cold wind blow down her neck as she subconsciously shrank back. "Enough for at least 2 weeks of being serialized. I've already handed it over to the editor of the newspaper." Without waiting for Gehrman's sparrow to ask further, she hurriedly added, "I brought a fountain pen, ink, and paper." Klein nodded slightly, took 2 steps forward, and reached out to grab Miss Magician's shoulder. Furs immediately focused as an illusory book appeared in her eyes as it slowly flipped through. Her surroundings immediately became dark and colorful. The reds were redder, the blacks were blacker, and the browns were browner, as they overlapped each other, making her feel like she was in a trance. Furs was already used to this state and had successfully recorded during this traveling process. She also carefully observed the scenery of her trip, as well as the strange and indescribable spirit world creatures that branded themselves in her mind. After a few breaths, her vision went black, and she felt a cold she had never experienced before. Her body couldn't help but tremble. Furs instinctively used a magic trick to illuminate her surroundings. Looking around, she realized that she was in a wooden hut. The world Gehrman's sparrow had already vanished. "Where am I?" Furs looked at the window and saw that there was a thick layer covering it, preventing any light from shining inside. This made her even more puzzled. She came to the door, stretched out her right hand, and pulled the door inwards. With a creaking sound, she saw the snow blocking the exit. Furs was stunned as Gehrman's sparrow's warning echoed in her mind. "Keep warm." In just 1 or 2 minutes, Klein had already circled the sea once. He used his prey that he had long selected to placate creeping hunger, and he returned to his rental apartment in Backland, awaiting Queen Mystic and Miss Sharon to gather information about any anomalies. In fact, with Klein's style, he would have personally taken action in this area and conducted an additional investigation at the same time. He wanted to ensure that Demonis Trissy had no plans to help Mr. Dorr escape, but considering that Zeradol was already in Backland, he decided to be cautious and give up the idea of loitering around. Under the influence of the law of convergence of Beyonder characteristics, he felt that if he were to wander around Backland, it was only a matter of time before he ran into Zeradol, or even Amon. Sigh, I'd already thought of how to disguise myself. Buying a bicycle, getting a uniform, and riding it across different streets as a postman. This is the easiest way to avoid suspicion. After taking a sip of Gurney sap he brought back from the sea, he leaned back into his chair and allowed his marionette, Enoni and Konas, to individually massage his shoulders and legs. The forsaken land of the gods, in the afternoon town camp. After Derek Berg opened his eyes, he immediately stood up, opened the door, and walked around the bonfire to the chief's room. Suppressing his excitement, he took a deep breath and raised his hand to lightly knock on the thick wooden door. "Please come in." Amidst the sounds of knocking, Colin Iliad's deep voice sounded. Derek turned the doorknob and pushed open the door. As he looked at Demon Hunter Colin, whose hair was white and had old scars on his face, he blurted out, "Your Excellency, I found some strange mushrooms. They can be eaten." Colin Iliad fell silent for a moment before slowly asking, "Mushrooms?" Hearing the puzzlement in the chief's words, Derek instantly recalled a mushroom he had seen before. It came from the abandoned temple of the fallen creator. It looked especially bright and appetizing, but it was essentially extremely dangerous. His mood instantly calmed down. He nodded and said, "Yes, mushrooms, different breeds of mushrooms. They can devour the flesh and blood of monsters to grow." Derek described the unique traits of the mushrooms in detail, and he explained what milk, beef, fish, and flour were. In the end, he emphasized that the mushrooms had to be fully cooked before they could be eaten, and to take note of differentiating the species which were rich in poison. Colin Iliad listened quietly without showing any change in emotions. After some thought, he said, "What other dangers do they have? Or should I say, points that require taking note of?" Derek's face suddenly flushed red. "I'll study it again." Without waiting for the chief to speak, he turned around, opened the door, and ran out. Returning to his room, he took a deep breath and sat down. He began to pray to Mr. Fool, asking him to forward the questions to Mr. World. Above the gray fog, Klein sat on the high-backed chair belonging to the Fool. He tapped the armrest with his index finger and silently muttered, "What other dangers are there? Although Frank's imagination, actions, and creativity make me a little fearful, he's still a Sequence 5 druid after all. No matter how dangerous the mushrooms are, how dangerous can they be? With the years of experience the City of Silver has experienced in the dark environment, it's easy to deal with those mushrooms. In the ruins of the Battle of Gods, the futures producing of milk, the pirate's head growing a watermelon, and other shocking phenomena were due to the remnant aura and divine power of Earth Mother in that area. The real murderer was a deity rather than Frank. Man, if the formation of the forsaken land of the gods happened due to the fall of the ancient sun god caused by the betrayal, the things left behind in that intense battle are definitely not limited to the powers of Evernight, concealment, degeneration, and storm. Perhaps there are some areas that have the influence of the sun and the earth. This. After some thought, he conjured the world Gehrman Sparrow and made him tell the truth. If they encountered divine powers of the earth domain, those mushrooms might experience an unknown mutation. After receiving a response, Derek rushed out of his room and ran to the chief's door. This time, the door opened without him knocking. Derek turned back to look at his teammates by the bonfire. He entered the room and casually closed the heavy wooden door. The divine power of the earth domain might cause the mushrooms to undergo an unknown mutation, he said frankly without explaining how he had figured that out. Demon Hunter Colin's expression remained unchanged as he repeated the key phrase softly. The divine power of the earth domain. He lowered his voice and finally fell silent. 10 seconds later, he said, "After we return, we can set up a region to plant them to see the effects." "Then, what's the price?" Derek immediately replied, "The formula for classical alchemist." Colin Iliad nodded slowly. "This has to be decided by the 6-member council. When we return to the city, I will push for this matter as soon as possible. Their expedition team would be returning to the City of Silver in the next 2 days. Firstly, after the exploration, the few who survived, as well as those who had lost their loved ones, needed time to adjust their mental states. Secondly, there was a limited amount of food left in the camp, and there was no way to plant any black-faced grass around Afternoon Town. They could only rely on hunting monsters to replenish themselves. Therefore, one of the responsibilities of the expedition team was to deliver safe food. Switching out teams would happen at fixed intervals. Yes, Your Excellency. Derek didn't rush him. He had long gotten used to this process. After he left the room, Colin Iliad came to the window and looked at the bonfire in the middle of the camp. That flame burned quietly. In the deep darkness, the faint yellow light scattered across the entire camp. Roasting over the fire was a disgusting vampire covered in pus. A few days later, Klein separately received the corresponding feedback from Queen Mystic Bernadette, the numinous Episcopates Patrick Bryan, and Miss Sharon. He confirmed that there were no anomalies regarding material or personnel flow in Backlund recently. From the looks of it, Demonis Trissy only wishes to speak to Mr. Dorr for the time being. Furthermore, this seems to be the first time they will establish a connection. Regardless, I still need to give a warning beforehand. This requires finesse. The more I say, the more likely a mistake will be made. Furthermore, I cannot reveal my trump card. After some thought, he found the hair of the deceased that Miss Magician had provided. He unfolded the piece of paper and wrote, "This is what you need. It's a lock of hair from a descendant of the Abraham family. The person who provided it has a request, that is to help ask the existence one question, the problem regarding how they get rid of the curse. Finally, let me remind you to be careful of Mr. Dorr." Klein folded the letter and tucked the lock of hair into it. He took out the adventurer's harmonica and blew on it. After a brief silence, Rionette Tanker walked out of the void with 4 beautiful heads in hand. "Give this letter to the seduced idiot," he instructed as he handed over the letter. Just as he said that, his heart skipped a beat, and he hurriedly added another question. "Can you locate him?" "Yes." One of the heads of Rionette Tanker answered the question before biting the letter. Klein narrowed his eyes.